So first of all, I'd like to introduce our guest speaker tonight. So I'm absolutely thrilled to have Louise Lennon here as well to talk about fairness at work and to think about the considerations for learning and development. So Lou and I have known each other for a number of years. I've been very fortunate to be able to work with her as a colleague, and she's also mentored me as well and a friend. So it's great to have her here. So Lou's very experienced in terms of people and organisational development as a specialist in that. So she's got over 20 years experience in doing that, and has had lots of leadership responsibility throughout the years as she's gone on her way. And a couple of years ago, Louise decided to go back to university to study.
I
left work.
I left my work.
Studied psychology in Loughborough, and then she set up her own business, which is the People Deal, and Lou will tell you a little bit more about that. And really, you became interested in the fairness at work and the workplace, and so Lou spent a year researching that. So I know she's going to give us a fantastic presentation today. So without further ado, I'd like to hand over to Louise.
Oh, thank you. Hi, everyone. Thank you for giving up your very sunny evening. So a lot of dedication. So just want to shout out to everyone about that one, because that's very impressive before we've even started. So yeah, thanks, Claire. So I'm Louise. I probably about 2.5 years ago, I was in very similar shoes to the ones that you all wear. So my career really was all in people and organisation development. And occasionally I was convinced to go into a more generalist HR role, but I very quickly made my way back to L&D. And yeah, I've worked with Claire in a couple of organisations actually. Yeah, and we've been very supportive, I think, of each other in the last year when we've both gone and done different types of work from a freelancing perspective. So just a little bit of, without kind of banging on about my passion for fairness, because I think that will become evident throughout the session, I left work in, I think it was towards the end of 2018. I was a bit fed up. I felt stuff and wasn't really getting a lot of cut through, and was getting quite frustrated. And it was the start of my 40s, and I realised that if I wanted to return to university, I'd always been a bit fascinated about psychology. If I wanted to go back to uni, the time was kind of now or never. So I decided to leave my job. I went to Loughborough Uni, regretted it as soon as I worked out how to do statistics. And I did a business psychology master's, which was very testing, but was also fantastic. And literally in the spring of 2019, I was getting towards the end of attending my lectures, and I was walking back, fortunate to live quite near the university. So I'd swapped lots of commuting to walking backwards and forwards from the uni, which was fantastic. And just literally I'd been to a lecture on engagement and employee development, and also how people respond to change. And literally just thought to myself, as I was reflecting on my decisions, and we tend to observe a lot of behaviours. We learn by experience, don't we, in our people and org development roles. And thought to myself, like, what's the basis of these decisions that people are making, whether to participate in work, whether to do a certain job, whether to continue their careers. And actually just thought to myself, maybe fairness is the answer. And from that spring day, I have been nothing other than totally obsessed with fairness in the workplace. And I'll talk about what we found out really kind of early on in researching organisational fairness. But before I do that, I just want to show you the kind of journey that we're going to go on tonight. There's lots of opportunities to take part. So Claire was very keen that we build some activities in, so we have done that. So there'll be a couple of occasions to go into breakout rooms with the same groups, and also we're going to do a question up front just to get our brains working, like I say, not distracted thinking about how sunny it is outside. So we're going to have a look at the benefits that fairness brings, and then I'm going to talk for about 15 minutes about the research evidence framework, which has got various names, but we'll call it the Fairness First framework tonight. Seems to change all of the time. And then we're going to really quickly talk about L&D. So from an L&D perspective, what does fairness mean? I'm going to talk to you about 6 main areas that tend to, with the organisations that we work with, they tend to be the risk areas that people don't always think about. Some are more obvious than others. And then do an activity around, so okay, so we know that there's fairness risk areas in L&D, so how do we go about addressing them? And then super quickly, I'll tell you a bit about what we do at the People Deal. And then we'll finish off in the chat function with what's one thing that you'll do now. You know, we know as L&D professionals that there's no point as putting together lots of development plans based on one webinar, but success for me is that everybody thinks about one thing, and that could be something for either yourself or the job that you do, or for somebody else. And then hopefully we'll have a little bit of time for some questions, and if we don't, then we're going to send the slides out to you, so my contact details are on there, so please do link up with me on LinkedIn and Twitter. Okay, so we'll start at the very beginning. So that spring day in 2019, I literally thought to myself, maybe it's got something to do with fairness, this engagement thing that we're kind of obsessed about in the workplace. And from that point, I simply Googled fairness and started to look at some Google Scholar articles as well around psychology, but also some other social sciences. And it was very easy to find out that fairness gives us a number of desirable benefits. It helps us to feel much more in control. So, you know, when we think of, you know, the last year and the pandemic, it's been really important for us to feel some sense of control. And when we're treated fairly, then that helps us feel like we're more in control. Obviously, that's been really important in terms of the way that workplaces have dealt with issues of, you know, flexible working from home, etc. It can feel that it gives our life more predictability because we can assess how we were treated in the past, and therefore we can predict, well, feel like we can predict the future. It provides us with a sense of trust and security that we're kind of going to be okay when we work with people that treat us fairly, or where we associate with friends that treat us fairly. We feel we get that psychological trust that we're okay. We don't need to be on the lookout for things to go wrong or to threaten us. In terms of groups of people, it helps us to feel that we're part of something, that we're valued in that group. We're hugely sociable animals, and we want to be accepted by the people that we associate with. And also it improves the quality of our relationships for all of the reasons that I've just mentioned. But one of the things that I found that really stood out for me is this sense of, it's not just about us being treated fairly, it's about us being fair to others. And actually, as humans, being fair to other people gives us this sense of dignity, and also feel that we have a meaningful existence. So this was literally the first couple of days of looking through some papers on how fairness impacts us. So in a nutshell, I just realised that it was something that I wanted to have a look into, but obviously from a workplace perspective, I was very aware that if I did it from a save the world kind of perspective, it might take me more than 12 to 18 months to research. So it was very much from that point, I'm going to look at workplace fairness specifically. And on that note, thinking about the workplace, it's your turn now to do a word garden, which Claire's going to help with, on the benefits that fairness brings, specifically in the workplace. What do you think they are?
So if you follow the link or do the pressy thing, Louise, can you stop sharing your screen and I'll share mine, and then we should be able to see the poll as it comes up.
Yes.
I'll also put it in the chat box as well. Thank you. Hopefully. That should come up. There we go. That's it. So probably know the bigger the words, the more times people have mentioned them. So you can put more than one if you want to.
Oh, easier change. That's interesting.
That sense of belonging, acceptance. So just give you a few more minutes to put some more stuff. Again, it's on the chat box. You should be able to just follow the link from that. Just type in qualities, come up.
I'm going to quote that, no nasty surprises. Whoever's put that.
Yeah, qualities getting bigger. So just one more minute to just do a few more. What we'll do is that we'll share this at the end and put this into the PowerPoint slide. So Lou, do you want to make any comments on that before I stop sharing it?
Yeah, well, my only thing really is, this is the fantastic thing about fairness, is when I talk to people about fairness, they say it's just a no-brainer. So how do we do it? So, you know, it's inherent in us, as we're wired, you know, we're hardwired for fairness. As human beings, we're watching for it all the time, whether we're conscious that we're watching for it or not. And I personally believe, after the research I've done, is that we're assessing and judging every interaction based on fairness. And the reason why it's so important in a workplace is because it's how people choose whether they'll truly participate or not. You know, we as humans, we're great at faking it. So we will have lots of people that sadly are probably faking engagement in a workplace because that's what they should do for social acceptance. So that's the only thing really. The other thing I would say is, the question I get is a lot about, is it about diversity and inclusion? And of course, diversity and inclusion is part of that, but sadly, a lot of that work is still about things that are about protected characteristics. And the fairness research that we've done, it doesn't take away the importance of people being treated fairly, irrespective of, you know, the list of things that they're protected for. But we've also got to remember that fairness is for everyone. And one of the questions I get is, you know, how do you include certain people through fairness, and that you might kind of exclude other people as a result? And that's something that I think we have to focus on in organizations all of the time, that when we're doing things to help a certain group of people, we need to make sure that we're not disadvantaging others. But yeah, okay, fabulous. Thank you, everyone.
Right, I'm going to stop sharing, and then what I'll do, I'll send that out.
Okay,
into
let me find mine again. Okay, is that pop back up?
Yes.
Okay, flawless swap over. Fingers crossed the rest of the session will be like that. Okay, thank you, everyone. So actually what we found in our, oh, hang on a second, she says, and this bit isn't working now. Oh, so what we found when we did some more research is that actually fairness has got a real transformational nature. And I noticed someone had said change in that word garden. And actually, there are three main impacts for fairness in the workplace. There's one at personal level, so what we, you know, as individuals benefit from by experiencing fairness and being fair to other people, and that's a greater sense of well-being and a greater sense of job satisfaction. So two super big desirable outcomes, not for just us individually, but also for the workplace. In terms of the other levels, the next one is interpersonal, so the way in which we interact with people. Psychological safety was the first thing to come up on that word garden, and actually this is about psychological safety. So if I feel safe with the people that I'm connecting with, I'm more likely to strengthen those connections, and commitment will result from that. So that's commitment to my job, it's commitment to the people that I work with, and it's a commitment to organisational objectives. And then the cultural one, so the things that are for everybody, is engagement. And my meaning of engagement is that in the flow of work as a kind of a well-being thing, because I know there's several different definitions of engagement. But people feel truly connected to their work, and they're almost subconsciously, unconsciously are working in an engaged way all of the time. And that of course leads to performing against the objectives that they're being set and the job that they do, and this increased sense of productivity. So I don't have to tell you all that productivity is a massive issue in the UK. And actually, I personally believe that a lot of the reason that productivity isn't where it needs to be is because we're neglecting the basic needs of people in the workplace, and they are too distracted, and we're asking more and more of them, and we're not giving them some of the basics that they need just to feel psychologically safe at work. It's not quite that straightforward. But these 7 outcomes are research evidence outcomes across 103 studies, really good high quality studies where people actually did studies and found these to be a result of fairness in the workplace. So it was hugely important to me to make sure that if I was offering something to a workplace, please have more fairness and this is how you do it, then I wanted to make sure that that was really credible and not some of the stuff that I'd experienced in my career where someone really couldn't tell me why they had a model and what it meant and what it was based on. And then just a little bit about the study. So we had about 26 theories, mainly from psychology, but also other social sciences that go into our research evidence framework. We looked at 103, I remember it well, high quality, and that was from about over 300 years, because a lot of you that have looked at academic papers, you'll know that a lot of them are quite rubbish. So we had quite a high threshold of studies that kind of made the grade. And then from this, so we did this really horrible, it kind of ruined my summer, if I'm really honest, this modelling of all these outcomes from these good studies. And we were able to identify that within the workplace there are things that predict fairness, there are things that fairness is made up of, and there are absolutely research evidence outcomes of fairness. And really, when I did this piece of work, I was thinking about me in my busy, exhausted kind of hamster wheel of a job in an organisation, and taking something that was actually really academic and far too complicated into something that was much more simple. And it's nearly there, it's not quite there yet, but we've definitely got the makings of a very practical framework for organisations to use. And I'm just going to tell you a little bit more about that. So it falls really nicely in 1 to 7, always good, as we know, from a learning point of view and from a memory point of view. And I'm not going to read the stuff on the right, because I'm going to whiz through it in a moment. But essentially, Fairness First is about a call to action. It's advocating for fairness for everybody in the workplace. And yes, of course, that will help us to address equality issues, but it really is for everyone, and that's why we kind of say fairness first as well, that it's for everybody. And it's the reason it has to come first is if you don't address fairness or unfairness issues in the workplace, then your people will be distracted, and there'll be lots of stuff going on in terms of their behaviour as individuals or with each other that is simply down to the fact that they're experiencing unfairness, and they'll be far too busy commenting on and responding to that to even start. So it's this proactive, preventative approach to engagement that Fairness First is all about. It's not about sticking plasters over well-being, it's about creating well-being at source, for example. The 2 compelling reasons to do it are 2 things that organisations really want to do. So they want to show a genuine commitment to social responsibility, whilst at the same time build capability now and also for the future. So it gives them this thing that is important to everybody. You don't have to convince anyone that fairness is important. It's important, it's a no-brainer, we should do it. So that's one challenge met from, a lot of change programs aren't like that. And also it's this nice balance of it helps you to be truly socially responsible for everybody, and at the same time it's almost this trust in people that when they experience these things, then it will build capability now and for the future. Another thing that's quite different to other change programs is that it does have this system-wide impact. So when I showed you the outcomes before, you saw that there was something in it for me from a personal level, something in it for groups and teams, and definitely some desirable outcomes for organisations. So it's a kind of, I like to call it a win-win-win situation, but I think that's a bit cheesy, so I don't say it. Only say it to fellow people that will understand where I'm coming from. After L&D, we're kind of brilliant at making things a bit more exciting, aren't we? And then there's four, so there's these three system-wide impacts, and then the next bit is really what is fairness all about. So there's solid foundations. So as an organisation, we have to think about the jobs that people do, the environment that they work in, how we get that sense of membership or inclusion, whichever word you want to use, and how do we respect and understand differences. So that's what the foundation are about. In terms of experiences, there are 5 critical experiences for fairness. One is about fulfilling people's psychological contracts. One is around an environment of high justice. One is around low politics. So that's like, you know, if people use others to get ahead, or certain people get more time in a board meeting, or certain people seem to get that bit of budget which you didn't get, and maybe it's because they play golf with someone, you know, that kind of stuff that goes on around political behaviour. And power. The other one is around high support, so people get the support that they need for the jobs that they are in, and then this reciprocal trust. So I trust you, and it was great to see trust come out as the kind of biggest word in the word garden, that I trust you, therefore you trust me, and we're going to work kind of well together. We looked at behaviours, we didn't call them values, so we found that there were 6 dominant behaviours that would exist in a workplace where people behave fairly, and they are authenticity, care for each other, gratitude, integrity, respect, and unity. So they're the 6 that came out hugely dominant compared to, I'm sure any of you that have done work on values and behaviours, which I'm sure many of you have, you know that there are thousands of values and behaviours, but these 6 were very dominant. And then, as I said before, the results are well-being, satisfaction, connection and commitment, and then this engagement, performance and productivity across the organisation. So these are all very big, lovely things, aren't they? And then this is just to show how it all works in a slightly different way. So we define workplace fairness as the quality of treating people in an ethical, impartial and morally right way. And that's in line with merit, what they need, and most importantly in the workplace, establish rules and expectations. When we spot something that goes off what is considered an established rule and expectation, and it isn't explained to us, we'll assess it as unfair, whether it is or it isn't, and particularly if it's something that somebody gets and we didn't get. So that's our definition as it stands today. And then you can just see here how you have this. We're having a rebrand, and they're doing some wonderful illustrations and videos for us that explain this much better than this slide. But this just essentially says that all of these things work together all of the time. And when they work together, then fairness is more likely to exist for more people in the workplace. And then, like I said, the slides will come to you so you can have a look at the detail, but just under each of these, I've put some examples of what types of things to look for if you want to do a quick diagnostic of, does your organisation have foundations for fairness, for example. You'd have a look at these 4 areas. And then a little bit more around the critical experiences. And you can see here, it's not very well just because of my design skills more than anything else, but this kind of cycle of you meet my psychological contract. Actually, at the People Deal, we say it's written and unwritten expectations. The psychological contract is 50 years old, and actually I think the work has even been updated by Rousseau herself on that, and she talks now about spoken and unspoken. And yet, how many times in organisations do managers not have open conversations with their team about what they expect out of their work and vice versa? So we have this fulfillment thing happening where trust is built. And then, of course, when that is breached or at worst violated, they're the two extremes of when a contract isn't fulfilled, then the reciprocal trust will just break down. And we've all seen situations in the workplace where there's just no going back in a relationship because something has happened. Not always on the employer side, by the way, it can also be on employee side. And then this is just a little bit more about simplifying the shared behaviours. So really, fairness creates these promises for people that they feel safe in the workplace, that they're not alone, you know, they're part of something that's massively important for human beings, that they matter within that group of people, that they can trust the people that they work with, that they're properly listened to, and that they're part of something. And a lot of you will have done work on purpose, and that's very much about being part of something bigger than yourself. And then that's that. I don't know what we're doing for time, Claire. Are we doing okay for time?
Yep, no, spot on.
My super whistle stop tour.
Yeah. No, actually, we're slightly ahead actually. So might be able to do a little, when we do this breakout, might be able to do a little bit of a share after.
Yeah, that would be great if we could, because there's kind of a lot to take in. But the main things really are about having good foundations, experiences, and behaviours. And from an L&D perspective, it's really about, it's kind of the experiences that are things that are happening kind of dynamically every day. So in the way that, you know, what people expect from their training, their development, their personal development, their performance development, etc. And also, I think as people coming into organisations, like, what are their expectations? They kind of say it at interview, and then I'm not quite sure where that conversation goes. So you can almost start to see, without me giving far too much away for this next session, but there are so many implications in the L&D people development or development space of fairness. So let's do the breakout, let people have a bit of a discussion about what they've heard so far.
Okay, so I'm going to put you in breakout rooms, and for 10 minutes to have a talk about what potential fairness risk areas when it comes to learning and development, and everything that involves in terms of you know, career development, performance management.
I'll see you shortly.
Yeah. Oh, hold on. So as you come back, if you want to put in the chat box some of the risk areas that you thought about in your team, that'd be great to share, please. Thanks, Nicole. Brilliant. So welcome back, everybody. I hope you enjoyed that conversation. If you can type in the chat box some of the main risk areas of that you talked about in your groups, would be great. And then what we'll do is that we'll just have a quick look through those. Thank you.
Consistency comes up a lot, and it's this searching that we do, that we're being treated fairly compared to other people, but also our brains can't work out. I found this quite fascinating, it might just be me, but our brains can't always work out whether it was fairness that happened to us or someone that we care about at work. So sometimes we can have exactly the same negative response if it's a colleague of ours that we think is being treated unfairly. And remember, unfairness doesn't mean like bullied, or I mean, it can mean those things, or discriminated against. It can simply be that somebody didn't get a place on a training program that they applied for and somebody else did.
Sorry. Favoritism's interesting.
Yeah. Just going to open the things. I can't see the top ones. Yeah, I like that one, Paula. Training for business reasons, not much use to the individual. I mean, quite honestly, if you haven't done the what's in it for me bit, then you might as well just not bother. Yeah. And Hayley, we know so much that the experience of working with a line manager is very different depending on who it is that you work for, and it's the most important relationship. I was talking recently with a client who's looking at consistent line management across all areas, all functions, and Europe, and I did have to stop myself from being a bit sarcastic. In my experience, we are not great at line management training. We never have been, and unfortunately it is the largest group of people, and sadly do sometimes get the most neglected. Okay, all right, great, thank you. Any you want to comment on, Claire?
I'll mute myself. No, I think they were all really valid, and a great range of them as well.
You have, and you've got some of mine. I've just spotted a couple. Okay, fabulous. Let me just close a couple of boxes down. So, these are the big 6 risk areas. It doesn't mean that all the ones you identified doesn't exist. Of course they do, but these are the most dominant ones that we saw in the research, and also they're the dominant ones in terms of how they impact people way, from a kind of trust assessment way, really. So it sounds so straightforward, but accessibility, because of connective technology and the fact that lots of the workforce can access, lots can't. You need a phone, a tablet, you need access to a PC. It is the most dominant one, is do all employees have equal access to where the learning, not just the learning as in programs, but where the knowledge is. So do people get, and remember that a lot of that knowledge is in people's heads. So does everyone get the access to the knowledge that they need? So it's something that's quite obvious, but it's actually quite a big topic around accessibility. The other one is time. So not just I'm given the time to, 2 days out of my week to go and train, but in terms of people's job and workload, job complexity and workload, do people truly have a similar amount of time to learn? Do we design jobs so that there is, I don't know, 5% that's built in for learn something new? Or no, a lot of organizations are getting really savvy about this one, that they're actually starting to write, learning is super important to us, it's hugely motivational, it's part of our basic needs. So actually we want to design jobs where people are able to do that, and sometimes that doesn't transfer into reality, but certainly I've seen an organisation, the intention to do that more is there. But of course there are simply some jobs that won't have as much time, and they're very quick to tell us in L&D, aren't they? Well, that's all very well, Louise, that you want me to go on that, but I've not got time to do that because my manager won't let me, and I'll have to do a week's work just to go on a week's course. We've all doubled up on our work to get either a holiday, go on a training course, etc. So, is that fair for us to ask people to do that? The next one is support, so equal access to support in roles. And this is when you look across, I know we've very much become kind of curators of L&D materials, and that's a really smart way to go, I think. We don't have to design everything our own, we just have to kind of show people where they can access stuff. And of course, lots of learning we know is social as well, so kind of creating environments where people can connect with each other and learn from each other. But actually, when we look across an organisation, does every employee have access to that support? Or do certain roles just get more? Requirements, so we've got a lot better at understanding learning styles and needs, but do we truly understand them and do we truly accommodate them? In the clients that I work with, it's a little bit mixed. So some of them really and learning difficulties, and they've got loads of paperwork and communications about those things, but actually when you go and look at their learning offer, they haven't really they haven't really applied that, if they're really honest. This is one that stood out, which really surprised me, but recognition. So do those people that dedicate their time to helping others to learn, do they get recognised for doing so? And, you know, use the chat function if you want to give me the answer to that one, because I think there are absolute heroes in our organisations that spend loads of time supporting and developing other people, and they don't get noticed, and they do that over and above their job, or sometimes see that as the most important part of their job. And we love those people, don't we? They're amazing to work with. And then terminology. So we've recently done a piece of research for a company around the use of talent in their organisation, and it has flagged huge concerns with whether the word talent and other words language that we might use in L&D, you know, career development in particular, is it inclusive or exclusive? And it brings me back to this question about, which I get a lot, which is how do you include lots of people, Louise, without including other people? And I would say a talent development program does that. So if you're going to have one, you've got to really honestly describe what you mean by the word talent. And you first of all need to make sure that the people that are selected appropriately for that are talented according to what you describe talent as. But the main thing for me is explaining that to the people that may not be in that talent development group. And if they're not in that fast track program, you know, that we have for grads, I mean, this is a great example. We'll put more investment into grads that we know nothing about than we might do into groups of people that have worked with us for 20 years. You know, so it starts to bring this kind of fairness stuff. It really brings up, I think, some different perspectives to think about the things that we do. And it's not that we're wrong for doing them. It's just that my job really now, I think for the rest of my career, is to help people think about things from a truly fair perspective and make some decisions based on that, and not just go along with the terminology and the things that we do in L&D because we've always done them. It doesn't mean that we need to be revolutionary, by the way. I don't like all this revolutionary, disruptive HR stuff that's going on. It means that we need to get smarter about what we already do well, and just think about it slightly differently. So yeah, so my ask of you is next time someone uses the word talent with you, I'd love you to kind of say, oh, who do we mean then? And what do we do with everyone else then? I'm just going to check. Okay. Cool. So there are the 6 main ones that come out of the research. Now the next exercise is going back into, are we going back into the same groups, Claire?
Yes, we are. Hopefully, fingers crossed.
Hopefully you're going back in the same groups, but if not, just flex and work with it. But the next exercise is, so let me just click back into this, is back in the groups. You can use the examples that I've put forward, or please use the ones that you've discussed that came out as a dominant theme for you. And I'd just like you to select one of those risk areas, whether that's a kind of huge behavioural one or a part of a learning offer or another perspective, and explain that, be in a position to come back and one person from the group to explain what you've selected and why you've selected it, and then also what ideas do you have to address it, because the wonderful news is that it's actually relatively straightforward to fix a lot of fairness issues once we've identified them. So I'll hand back over to Claire to do a...
Okay, thank you. So I'm going to open all the rooms.
So we'll see you back in 15 minutes. Welcome back, everyone.
Hi.
Hello. Hope you've all had a conversation that's going to change the world.
Yeah, hope I can read my notes. I'm hoping I can read my notes.
Fabulous.
Back in a minute. About 10 seconds.
So what we've got 5 rooms, haven't we?
Yes. So I think we've got, how long have we got? About 10 minutes or so.
Okay. Oh. don't think I've got one clock in my house that's the right time, or phone or whatever. Okay, fabulous. Who would like to do a bit of feedback, a kind of 1 minute quick feedback about what their group decided? We'll go, should we go? No, I won't. Oh God, it'll be unfair if I choose the number, won't it? So who would like to go first?
I'll go first, get out of the way.
Yeah.
This is, I think we were room 2, I can't remember. So we chose recognition.
Yeah.
And the reason our group chose recognition, we were really feeling it for the unsung heroes within organisations being recognised. You know, the importance of feeling valued, building relationships. There's this human need in us that we need that have that recognition that needs to be fulfilled, that we can offer a sense of purpose.
Yeah.
It can improve our status. That's another reason why we felt it was important. And what we liked as well, it's the ability for the organisation to see us, really see us, and motivate us to do a lot better as well. We have those good recognitions. So it's a lot of outcomes. So how to address it was involving others.
Yeah.
So opportunities for peers. You do have those schemes, don't you, where peers can put forward, which is fine. But one of my colleagues in the group, Shira, I don't know if you want to say about that mug example that you read about. I thought that was a really good example.
Yeah, I think most people have seen it. It's on LinkedIn. I think it's a recruitment agency or something quite big, and they've got this scheme where someone randomly would just put this mug, it says you've been mugged, on a mug with loads of chocolates inside, and it's basically just saying thank you because of how you've worked, or you know how well you've been doing at your job. And then I don't know how often they do it, but I'm sure it's that every week.
Yeah.
The next person then gives it to someone else that they think deserves it, which I thought was quite good.
With one less chocolate.
Yeah.
We like this. You can address it with simple schemes, simple reward schemes, nothing so overcomplicated. But one of the things that stood out when we were discussing, they're all well and good, but we felt the most important was the culture of the business and managers, just that simple recognition from the managers that they can see you, and having managers with the emotional intelligence to do that. And we thought it's a behaviour change really, and a shift with businesses, and a shift in terms of how they recruit their leaders and people, so you can have a culture of recognising good work and offering it. It doesn't feel false or pushed.
Definitely. One of the things, Nicola, and the group that I've seen that works really well is involving people that we know contribute a lot to L&D in the more formal programs. So, you know, the stuff like, oh, come at lunchtime because you can come and eat with us and chat. And because we know a lot of learning is social learning, that, you know, to just say to them, oh, you're a bit of an expert in this. I call them silverbacks, which is like probably totally wrong. But it's those people in the organisation that've been around forever and they know everything.
Yeah.
And it's like, how can we get those people just socialising with our groups? And sharing what they know without even realizing how much they're sharing. And also, like you say, they're more seen then. You know, this group of people are going to come to day 2 because you know they've got expertise in this area. And I find that even the shyest people, when you tell them what it is you want them to contribute, they're more than happy to do so.
Yeah.
Oh, that's fabulous. Thank you so much.
Okay.
Right, who'd like to go next? Susanna's going to go next, so things just
we were room 5, and we chose accessibility. It would be very much an underpinning theme in our first discussion, and really it really underpins everything else, that without accessibility not much learning and development is really going to happen in any meaningful way, and certainly not organisation wide. And a number of ways to address this. First of all, a sort of back to basics, making sure that communication is timely, making sure that there's time to plan properly, that people have plenty of notice if we're talking about an actual learning and development event, so that it's fair in the sense of the warning and the preparation. And secondly, the commitment from management. You have your appraisal interview, you have, and then you decide on a development plan, and then maybe don't meet till the following year. Perhaps, some more interim one-to-ones and actually following up on that and making sure that something does happen. That is a way of giving access to learning and development rather than preventing it. Then in terms of the actual design of a learning programme, inclusive language, different learning methodologies, learning styles which go in and out of fashion, but certainly fitting.
Oh, they do though, but we forget them, don't we? And they're so important in terms of learning design, to give people a different option to do an activity. If you're a reflector, do this. If you're a so-and-so, do that. You're still going to learn the same thing, but just in your preferred style.
And allowing for people who learn more slowly, the importance of one-to-one support. And we did, of course, find that although we picked accessibility, we were dipping into all the others because they all depend on one another. The importance of the one-to-one support, mentoring being a key to that also will help to improve accessibility, because it brings it down to it brings it onto the individual level. Blended learning, so that there's some online but also some face-to-face. So lots of things there. I think I've covered anything. Understanding how people work. There are issues like part-time workers who are often neglected, or night shift workers, where a learning programme might be put on at a specific time or a specific day when they're not in work. So just thinking through all of these things and planning and going back to basics, that was very much our theme there.
Yeah, definitely. And it is back to basics. It's almost having a good spring clean of that, what does L&D stand for here and how do we want it to be presented? And I really liked, Susanna, your point about the basics of getting things right. So, the quality of the invite letters, the quality, the time we give people to organise, it's not just people with family responsibilities, but, we all have a life. And actually for a company to dump a 3-week programme on us across the summer, it's just kind of not cool anymore, is it? I'm convinced people are going to start refusing going on big programs soon, because they now know that they can be delivered in such a different way than us all having to kind of move out of our homes for a considerable amount of time. Oh, that's fabulous, thank you. Have we got time for another one, Claire? Who's desperate to speak up? Because unfortunately we probably won't have time for everybody.
Okay, so room 3, Louise, basically our risk was time. At least
chestnut.
I think at least 2 people in the group. They're working in time-pressured environments, and frontline staff are just not being given time to learn. And the only time that they are allowed to learn is if it's mandatory learning. They have to meet a requirement, but otherwise it's not. And then there was somebody else in the group that had a very different expectation in their organisation. They're very much a learning organisation, and the expectation there is that you will learn, you will spend some time during your working day learning, improving, developing yourself in some way. Very different cultural expectations. And quite often the experience was that it's the people in the business who are making the money that are getting all the time and resources for learning.
Yeah.
Quite often, back office staff, the people in the sort of standard functions that are keeping things going, but are not seen as the big money earners.
No, exactly. And that's where the productivity is, isn't it?
Yeah. So that's our group.
Super, thank you. Right, I'm feeling mean because not everyone's had a chance to speak. Am I okay to move on, Claire, do you think? Or you're on mute?
Sorry. Well, you could, yeah.
I don't mind using the time up to hear from each group. We've only got 2 more. Should we do that?
Let's do it quickly then. I think that's a good idea.
Super quickly in a nutshell. Who'd like to talk for group 1? Group 1 person's gone for their tea. Which one were we missing then? Number 4?
Yeah, I was in number 4.
Ah, fabulous.
We chose time as well.
Did you have anything to add to the last group?
Just to highlight the benefits of the training to the people so that they have a bit more desire to actually do it and to make it happen.
Yes, yeah.
One of the examples that we had was they actually fined their line managers if the line managers were blocking them from coming to the training.
Oh no, it's one of those, Nicole, where it's like, no, of course you can go on your training, but like, when are you going on this training again? And I'm going to phone you in the morning of that training. You know, you're like, that's not helpful.
And then just remind them that it's a long-term degrading of their team, because it's for their benefit, it's for the company's benefit and their team's benefit. If they're always too busy to do training, they're never going to get ahead, are they?
Yeah, definitely. And I know that we can do loads of smart ways to help people learn, you know, and it's not all about kind of formal learning, but you know, there is a place, and I think even more so actually, we're going to slightly change the way that we do it, but you know, we should not dismiss the fact that we like being together and we're social animals, and I think that's going to come back with a vengeance when we're all feeling a bit more settled. I don't think the programs will be the way that they were, but I certainly think that there'll be a real hybrid version of learning, if you like. So kind of get ourselves ready for that, and all the fairness kind of considerations that will bring with it. I'm a big fan of transactional analysis around adult and adult. I think we should invite people to learn more at work and facilitate that as best we can for them. But you know, I'm an absolute rebel of sheep dipping, and when people have come to me and said, you know what, Louise, I need some help writing the objectives and benefits of my training, I'm a bit like, do you want to put the effort in? Because if it's not a really obvious return, you know, not a return on investment, but you know, you can't say how people are going to shift their behaviors or skills or whatever, then I would just sit them with someone that's really good at it and let them learn that way. So, okay, is there anybody else that wanted to speak up? I don't think we had anyone from room 1, did we?
Quite sure which group.
We were talking about accessibility.
Yeah.
That not everyone has got access to technology or resources. For example, me, I have found out in some companies that they ask for mandatory training, but they expect the employee to pay for it, or they either make you sign a document that says if you leave before, say, like 3 months, then you will be entitled to pay back the money that we had spent on you, when it's something that is mandatory. Shouldn't be like that.
No.
I mean, if it's some extra training, fair enough, that you know you have to pay back. But if it's something that you must have to start a job, I find it really unfair. So yeah, we were talking about basically that the accessibility, not just technologies, is about the resources, the money, because sometimes you are willing to work somewhere, and just because you cannot afford to pay for a specific training, then you will lose the job. For paying it, but then you need the job. So yeah, we were mainly mentioning that.
Yeah, definitely. I think that one of the things I do with my clients is when they say, oh, we can run this I don't know, purpose accelerator program, Louise, but the only people that can access it are, well, basically everyone can access it other than people in the factories on the shop floor, because they don't have access to it. And I'm like, well, that's not the solution then, is it? Like, that's not a fair solution. You're not including everybody to a program that is a cultural program for every employee. So we have to find a way to do that in a fair way, else you're going to damage the program before you've even started. And I think often organizations get really focused on what it is they want to deliver rather than how they're going to deliver it to everyone, and they'll almost ignore some unfairness things at the beginning and say, well, it's because of the technology. And I'm like, well, fix the technology then. or postpone it for 6 months until you're able to do that. So, you know, these are the types of considerations that I think as L&D professionals we need to have. And we, you know, we'll do our part for fairness if we're simply bringing up these kinds of questions to people. Like, are we okay then going ahead with that if it excludes this group of people? Well, what are we saying by doing that to people, especially if your companies are running inclusion strategies, you know, and well-being? They don't sit alongside each other when there's unfairness happening. It's impossible. People will be forever distracted. Okay, thank you so much for feeding back. I'm just going to do a time check, see how we're doing. Oh, we're doing okay. This is good. Right. So just a bit about the people deal. So we're a couple of years old now. We're based at university. We are, I kind of position there's 5 of us in terms of associates with different expertise areas, because a lot of the work we do is across the whole employee experience. It's always about fairness, but of course we look at different parts of people and organisation development. And essentially our offer is around the framework where I've described to you the science that's gone into it, the research, and making sure that that's really practical. And it's kind of nearly there, but it's always work in progress. So please let me know, particularly when you get the copy of the slides, because I appreciate it was a whistle-stop tour of fairness, but please let me know what you like, you know, the terminology you like, what you think we've missed. The feedback is massively important to me. I think we will always be evolving the framework. And then in terms of tools, we've developed some measures. So we have a foundations diagnostic, which we're going to make available for everyone to use. That's kind of where to get started on your fairness journey. We're going to have a national fairness survey as soon as things settle down with coronavirus. We're going to do a UK wide fairness survey to have a look at differences in people's perceptions of fairness in the workplace. And I'm actually really fascinated to see how demographic differences show up within that. And then also there's some development tools around self-assessment. How fair are you? We've aligned it with some personality traits. That's very much a work in progress, but I'm super excited about that, because imagine a leadership program that could give a diagnostic for a leader, for example, and say whether they're inclined to be fair or not in the way that they do their role. So hopefully that will contribute something a little bit new and fresh to our leadership development programs. And then in terms of training, so from the autumn, we're going to pilot our first Fairness First program for everyone with a food company. And we're going to put a group of people through a cultural change program that's organisation as a mixed group of roles. So I'm delighted that we've got a company that signed up for that. So I can test that out on them. And then we're looking at a Fairness First programme for line managers. I do want to save line managers from the neglect that they have. And I think that I can deliver a really great line management development programme based on fairness that will tick lots of the other boxes that we need to tick, such as well-being, you know, difference between management and leadership, the standards of management at every stage of the employee life cycle. So it's not fairness and not the other stuff, it's all the stuff, but with a fairness perspective. And then we're also looking at certifications. So I don't want to be tied up doing lots of training in organisations. I would much rather train the likes of yourselves in a certificate programme where you're trained in fairness, and you can therefore deliver different programmes in your organisation without needing to have me or an associate, and obviously the cost is better to do that. And also because I just believe that we need to develop this competency in organisations, and this is the fastest and most cost-effective way for organisations to do that, kind of build capability from within. And then what I'd really like you to do at the end of the session, thank you so much if you're still with us, what I'd really like you to do is just use the chat now. I'd like you to just take a little bit of moment to just a couple of minutes to reflect. And, you know, what is the one thing you're going to do personally that you think will increase fairness where you work? And you're going to do that straight away, not like tonight, but in the next few days, because I'd really love to see that feedback. And I'm going to look at the chat whilst you're doing that. Make sure you do it to everyone as well, if you're happy to do that, so that everybody can see the thinking across across the group. What are you going to do, Claire?
I don't know. I'm having a thinking.
Hang on a minute.
Yeah, I'm probably going to do something about the values for this company that I'm doing some work with. I think, I think that's quite.
Just give them the fairness behaviour. Someone said to me, what values does the people deal have? When I got interviewed for this thing, and I said, it's just the 6 behaviours. Like, we don't have different values, we have behaviours. So they were like, oh, I thought, genius, don't have to make up values. So
it's good stuff coming in.
James, if you're going to study the slides, I'm going to phone you in a week and ask you some questions on them. Super. So challenging, questioning the terminology used. Yeah. The hint and tip I'll say about if you start work on this is just take the definition and look. You don't have to look at the details of the framework. Take the definition and then just look at your policies, because immediately you'll start to see, I'm not sure we do that. And remember, this isn't about just people that are disadvantaged. This is everybody. Because I truly believe if we fix fairness for everyone, then we'll take care of each other better. We need to stop telling people to just stop doing loads of stuff, and we need to describe to them what we want them to do more of, which is this fair behaviour. Share with my L&D manager. Lovely. You're going to be popular, Nicola. You'll be like, can I have a minute? Then an hour later, supportive and accessible.
I like the idea of sharing it within that change programme.
Yeah, definitely.
It'd be interesting to see how the company they're working with, what the results are for that, because I think that's brilliant.
Yeah, I love that. I love that one from Ruth. So talk to managers and just say, I mean, there's loads of questions in this pack, so you can go and just like drop a clever question in to a conversation. You know, when we do that program, are we inclusive of everybody? Or the talent one's a nice one. If there's someone you don't like that's senior than you in an organisation, I'd drop the talent development question in if I would do it. Do we like the word talent? If you've got a talent strategy, that one will go down like a bomb. Very funny, James. Yeah, lovely. Okay, well, hopefully it's given everybody some food for thought. Just going to shut that down and see. And we have got 7 minutes. So I don't know if you want to ask me any questions, or everybody's ready to go and make their tea.
So, has anyone got any questions for Louise? Anything about anything you've heard today? Or David Webber?
Yeah, hi. I was wondering, Louise, whether you'd in your research, your sites, you'd looked at any countries where they have fairness more ingrained in their kind of culture, such as Denmark, for instance, or somewhere like that.
Yeah, definitely. Well, actually, we did look, we made sure that our research was for kind of our type of culture and our cultural behaviours. So we looked at countries that were similar to the UK in terms of how their workplace culture kind of is. And we didn't find a huge difference actually across. So you mentioned Denmark there. We saw that there was more research in terms of fairness, mainly about equality in Denmark actually, but there isn't a massive difference really. And I think it just boils down. I'm sure if we looked at very different cultures, you know, where control, you know, if we looked at China around control and stuff, I imagine we would get a very different, you know, I'd never show this model to a Chinese organisation because I don't think it's appropriate for their culture. But if I'm really honest, as humans, we've got much more in common than we think we've got. And because a lot of it is based on humans and human behaviour, as long as the workplace culture is reasonably similar, then, you know, the framework should and does, according to the research, work in those areas or in those countries. One of the things I did want to do, David, is I did incorporate a lot of science, a lot of psychology theories, because I wanted to make sure that the model was based as much on psychology, particularly work psychology, obviously, as it was on the studies that were kind of measuring an external thing like productivity or whatever. I hope that answers your question. So yeah, I think we're just inherent, we're basically hardwired for fairness, and I think that obviously the environment that we operate in has got to impact that, but I don't think the work environment's significantly different enough across Europe for there to be a big difference. Thanks for your question.
Thanks, David. Thanks. Someone else got another question for Louise? We've got time for one more, probably. Anyone else? No. Oh, and I was going to ask a similar question to David, which is I got something through on the email about different generations and the baby boomers and millenniums and Gen Z, and I was going to ask a similar question whether you'd found any differences in their thoughts about fairness.
Yeah. Now listen, we couldn't find one paper on generational differences with fairness, mainly because our papers are about different aspects of fairness that we've kind of put together for our own understanding. So I think there just hasn't been one yet. But the fairness survey that we're looking to do, Claire, I think that will really show that generational differences. Yeah. And that will have the different indicators of fair experiences. And of course, we'll be able to look at different age groups. But I do imagine, again, it's not significant different, because like I say, it's so much about our human nature that it shouldn't be that different. I tell you what we do need to be careful of is that the new generations that are coming into the workplace now, they are not afraid to use their voice. And I honestly believe that they're going to speak up a lot more about unfairness to themselves or to other people. They're not going to bother with the grievance and disciplinary processes of yesteryear. I think they're literally going to walk into CEO offices and talk to them about it, because we've got this much higher level of voice, I think, in organisations. Yeah. Not my generation, we're still a bit afraid to kind of say what we think. But the new lot coming through, they're just not, if they see a pay difference that hasn't been explained to them, they will knock on the door and they will ask the CEO, and we've got to be prepared for stuff like that.
Yeah, or voice it on social media is the other thing, isn't it?
Yeah, well, exactly, because we're not closed, are we, anymore? Like, you never leave an organisation, you're always linked up on LinkedIn or wherever, or your social groups. So the employee experience doesn't just stop when you leave somewhere. You take it with you, and we talk about it a lot. So
brilliant.
Okay. Well, listen, if anyone's got any questions, just please do contact with me. Please link with me on LinkedIn and follow the People Deal, because we've got some really exciting stuff coming up. And I do make sure that our offer, within our offer, there's a lot of things that are complimentary and free. And one of my positions around the fairness work is I have done the research, I've invested in that personally, but the framework is there for people to use, because really I want to be there working with organisations that are finding it particularly difficult. But we've written it in a way that everyone on this call that knows something about people and something about HR and something about L&D should be able to understand it. And if they don't, then I've done something wrong.
Brilliant. Lou, thanks for your time today, and fantastic presentation, and it's been really thought-provoking and interesting, and I hope everyone else here has found it as useful as I have.